Welcome, James Governor.
Okay. Great. Thanks. Okay, bom dia. So, got a lot of ground to cover this morning. I wanted to begin with a story about a friend of mine. This is Ben Fletcher. He works at the Financial Times in London, and at a conference I run called Monkey Gra, earlier this year, he gave the keynote. A lot of people said this was one of the best keynotes they'd ever seen, which is not particularly remarkable. What is remarkable in terms of his ability as a communicator and his ability to work and manage teams, he managed about 30 to 40 people at the FT, is that he's both deaf and blind. So the Financial Times gives him a lot of support in terms of his job role. They have someone there to sign for him in meetings and so on. But he said he was struggling in meetings. Part of the talk, which was about accessibility and inclusion, was that people were just talking too quickly. This is something, if you're not a native English speaker, I'm afraid I may be part of the problem. Anyway, he wanted to slow things down, so he looked to indigenous peoples, and in the States, they had this notion of a talking stick. So in the meeting, if you're going to talk, you have to be holding the stick. Now, as a good Yorkshireman, he likes football, and he said, actually, we won't have a stick, but we'll have a meeting football. And so you couldn't talk in meetings unless you were holding the ball. And it went quite well. He found the meetings were going at a pace that was better for him, and he could communicate more effectively with the team, and it felt like a better working environment. But the real story here is not the advantage it gave him. After the meeting, one of his colleagues, a young Japanese woman, came, and she was in tears, and she thanked him. She said this was the first time she felt she had truly been able to contribute and be part of the meeting. A lot of the conference was about this notion of if you create great experiences for people with some special needs, you actually create better experiences for everyone. If we think about curb cutting, so it's this notion of, on the side of a pavement, you want a curb. That began as something so that people in a wheelchair could get access. But of course, it's better for everyone. In fact, Ben, who's a new father, spoke about this himself. He said he finally really understood the advantage of ramps, not so he could walk around, but it was easier for him to push his kid. So just thinking about accessibility and inclusion. So we're here nominally to talk about DevOps, right? What is DevOps about? And you can do the people, process, and tools. It's about culture. I think that Brian after me will be talking about this a little bit. But I think one of the things about DevOps is it's about creating environments in which people can thrive so that they can do their jobs more effectively. So one of the problems we've got is that open source isn't as welcoming as it should be. On the face of it, when open source began, it was, oh yeah, kumbaya, it's great for everybody. Well, it was great for a certain constituency. It was great for white men. There was a particular culture that was set up. If all you need to do is to go and look at the news lists as was. But now a lot of the documentation around open source, if you look at the behaviors of people like Linus, Torvalds, really quite a lot of offensive behavior there. So open source has not been welcoming. And we need to fix that because we need to be accessible to a wider group of people. And if I look around the room, well, look around the room yourselves. And here we are, we've got open source software, we're trying to work and collaborate, and actually, it's pretty homogenous here. Hacker culture isn't welcoming. Notion of shit posting and all of that. Let's get a rise out of people, let's troll people. Well, maybe take a step back. and think about how to be more welcoming. You might have a particular coding culture or a particular coding community, and they'll introduce a code of conduct. Someone will always complain, what do we need a code of conduct for? Well, we need a code of conduct so we have a set of rules so that people know how they can behave so that we can be more welcoming. Because there's a skills shortage, right? We need to bring more people in. We need to make them more welcome. Tech is not welcoming. We like to think it was. Yeah, come and join us. Be a software developer. It's great. It's great. But, you might learn Ruby on Rails. You've been through a boot camp. What happens? First people you meet, they're like, oh, no, Rails sucks. What did you learn that for? So we need to fix that. And I think there is this notion that, why are people trying to police my behavior? I'm just here doing my job, right? Why are you telling me I can't be part of this community anymore, or that I can't post in this online forum? Well, basically, it's about behavioral norms. It's about treating people better and with more respect. I think we do have some challenges. So DevOps, we can have a lovely sort of, creating an environment, psychological safety. But then there's also this notion of you broke it, you fix it. There are contradictions here that sort of need to be addressed. So, 100 million developers. What does that look like? What does it think about global scale challenges that we've got? Because that's what I've been thinking about a lot. We've got obvious problems with democracy, problems with climate, some pretty fundamental challenges that we all need to address. Software is going to be a big part of that. So, how many software developers are there in the world? Nobody knows, is the simple answer. We really don't have a good answer to that. So, I'm a researcher, so I can make a wild-ass guess, and I will say it's about 25 million. There are different estimates. But we see sort of that is around about a reasonable kind of number. And one thing I think is interesting, obviously the developer population is growing pretty fast, and you only need a compound annual growth rate of about 15% to get to 100 million developers. But in order to hit that sort of target, as I say, we're going to have to do a better job of welcoming people. But what sorts of people are going to be coming into our communities? How are we going to collaborate more effectively? So one of the communities I think that's obviously very, very interesting is going to be Chinese software developers. I mean, this is a country where there is a new university opening every single week. Lots and lots of people learning computer science. Most STEM graduates, China, 4.7 million a year. And a lot of that, I mean, basically, if you're doing STEM today, you're going to be learning some computer science. The scale of the goals, so 2020, globally advanced levels on AI. 2025, world-leading breakthroughs. 2030, clear world leader in AI. But are we going to be able to collaborate with them? Are they going to be able to collaborate with us? Are we going to use the same tools? Are we going to speak the same language? TIDB is an interesting database. I think partly because it was one of the first pieces of Chinese technology. It came into the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. It's kind of hipster stack. It's written in Rust. The first time they tried to build a database, they did all their documentation in Chinese and then sort of tried to anglicize it. And they found it really difficult to get it adopted in the West. So they started again, and the whole team had to speak in English. So we're all going to speak English now, all of the docs, all of the communication, everything will be in English so that we can get broader adoption. So that was a Chinese company saying, well, actually, we're going to adopt that as our lingua franca. There's a lot of amazing and interesting technology coming out of China right now, but the immediate comment here was very Chinese documentation. And so for me, I mean, I guess there's a lot of questions today about building walls and all that sort of stuff, exiting unions, not collaborating, and that really scares me, right? And it seems a shame, the idea that we would have a wall between them and us, and obviously we've got this notion of sort of a great firewall of China. The web browsing experience is different there. But this is happening all over the place. I mean, if you're on Apple Maps and you're in one geography, Crimea is part of Russia, right? So we've got some challenges about geography and some challenges about collaborating. And I think the best of humanity and the way we can actually grow communities, solve problems, is when we're actually being open to one another. 40 million is an interesting number to me. That's the current stats from GitHub about how many GitHub users there are, which is kind of interesting. You're like, wait, you said there's only 25 million developers out there. Well, again, wild-ass guess. Lots of people have lots of accounts. But we could use 40 million as a proxy for the number of developers today. So maybe we're closer to that 100 million developers already. What I think is sort of amazing, it was just 6 months ago, or even less than that actually, just a few months ago, I was doing a similar presentation in San Francisco, and the number was 31 million, right? So GitHub has had almost 10 million people join in the last year. So there's an acceleration here. And I think there's some interesting things. It's not just China. Nigeria, to me, is a fascinating market, right? So lots and lots of open source work now. There are so many interesting tech conferences happening in Nigeria at the moment. But again, in terms of this, we had a Chinese wall. Nigerians have a wall, right? They want to be part of our community. They want to contribute to projects like Jenkins or Golang or whatever it is, but we won't give them visas. They want to be part of our community. There are 200 million people in Nigeria, lots and lots of people learning to code, and we're all looking to hire. We want richer communities, we want bigger communities, and we need more developers. And the first thing we say is, oh no, sorry, you can't come to our conference. And this is true in Europe, and it's certainly true in the US. So visas is a big problem. How are we going to improve ourselves as an industry if we're excluding people because of where they're from? But Nigeria is just amazing. Seriously, follow some Nigerians on Twitter. If you're into tech, you'll get a real sense of the vibrancy of what's going on there. I say tons and tons of conferences. So if we think about some fast-growing regions in terms of contributors, I was very pleased when I was sort of pulling this together to see that GitHub says that Portugal is on the list. So I'm in Lisbon today. Do we have any Portuguese in the audience? Excellent. But this is a very European crowd. I actually thought there would be more. We need more Portuguese Jenkins users. Come on. Sure, CloudBees would appreciate that. But Portugal, I think, is a really interesting geography. Lisbon is really buzzing at the moment. So there's this conference, Web Summit. It started in Dublin. It's now in Lisbon every year. 70,000 attendees. It's one of the biggest tech conferences in the world. Very, very much about developer culture. I mean, it's sort of an import, so it's in Lisbon, but it's a team of Irish folks that originally put it together. But it's really sort of served to trigger the fact that Lisbon has this, or not trigger, but help foster this amazing community we've got in Lisbon and in Portugal. So here is a company called YLD. They've done a lot of great work in Node.js. It's an agency now based in the UK. The founder is a friend of mine. His name is Nuno Job. So they've got developers all over the place. They've got developers in London. They've got developers in Lisbon. And they've got a development shop in Porto as well. So they just do some really good work. And the thing I'm thinking here is that this is a diverse range of folks. The contribution that we're seeing from Portuguese developers to open source, and this Node.js thing is really notable. And this, to me, feels like the future of work. I said a diverse range of folks. One of the things they've been better at is in fact, bringing more women into their team. And that is a big, big problem for us as an industry. This is sort of, I think it's a really scary chart, actually. And one of the shames of it is that, like, it seems to have started getting bad just as I got my first computer. So, I mean, I don't want to do, confuse causation and correlation, but the industry has been less and less welcoming to women every year since basically I started playing with a PC. This is 50% of the population, and something's going badly wrong. Like, if you want to grow something, it's probably a good idea to address the whole market. I talked about this sort of unwelcoming thing. Boot camps is a really good example of this. So people that choose to go to boot camps, and sometimes it's people from other industries. There's a woman, she's been in tech, been in finance, wants to become a developer, right? And so boot camps is a great way to learn tech skills and enter our industry. But we're not welcoming. It's like, oh, you don't have a computer science degree. You've just done a boot camp. You just went to General Assembly. You're not as good as us. We're really good in tech at telling people they're not as good as us. And it's a particular problem because if you look at boot camps and their demographics, so comp sci now, as I said, that graph going down, maybe 10% of the people in that course are going to be women. Boot camps might be as many as 28. But if we as an industry are saying that boot campers are not as good, again, we're shutting ourselves off from opportunity. So who am I? I'm James Governor. A company called RedMonk. We've been around for a while. Our thing is really about developers. So we call developers the new kingmakers. Why is that? It used to be that development was very much a top-down sort of command and control, RFP theater. You had legal and procurement and the CIO sort of making the decisions about who used what. That's just not the case anymore. Today, it's open source. You can go to GitHub. You can pull down a project, spin up an Amazon Web Services instance, and you can get going without asking for any permission. That's very different. There's a lot more bottom-up effects. So that's the way we sort of view the world. A bit about language, because I do think that's significant in terms of, again, inclusion. Because, who here's, has anyone here ever used the phrase, oh, that's a toy language? You hear about one thing and it's like, oh, no, that's, I'm a Java person, so that's not as good as what I've learned. Or Java sucks, I do everything in C++. What's interesting to us, really, I think, is just that JavaScript is what began as a toy language is now absolutely a core and important part of the overall tech landscape. Lots and lots of choices, and that does create challenges. But there is some consistency. Java's still chugging along. Are there any Java developers here? Don't worry, you'll still have jobs for the foreseeable future. It's okay. So Java continues to just do great work there. I want to talk a bit about Visual Studio Code, which is interesting to me because if you were one of those Java programmers, chances are high that you use the Eclipse IDE. So the new hotness is Visual Studio Code. Kind of incredible, same team. It's Eric Gamma again. So the person that has written two of the most significant open source coding environments is the same person. But I think the scale of this, I think, is really interesting because it's been one of the hottest adopted technologies we've ever seen. The core engineering team is only about 20 people. It's a little bit bigger now. And I want to think about that in terms of distribution, because if we're thinking about inclusion and how do we include more people, what is the advantage of the internet? It's distribution. So open source grew out of this era of sort of, we could share disks around, and Slackware. But over time, it's just become more and more an internet-enabled phenomenon. But what's happened now is that actually, and we're seeing this with some sort of licensing questions, people are like, oh, no, wait, maybe open source isn't the model. Like, we're a venture capital company, and we want to make all the money. I think so we're a venture capital company, and they're all moaning about it. And they're like, oh, open source is a problem now. We need new licenses. We need to be more exclusive. We don't actually want this to run on Amazon. Which is kind of weird to me, because Amazon is the greatest distribution network for software that the world has ever seen, right? Amazon is a phenomenon. And from that perspective, why shut yourself off from the opportunity to have everyone using your stuff? Technologies like Lambda make programming easier, hide some of the complexity. We've had 2 days talking about this of, how do we deal with that complexity? Lambda's a good example of getting rid of complexity so that actually the industry can be more welcoming to a wider range of folks. Not everyone can be this kind of fabled full-stack developer. And again, in terms of who's a coder, who's a developer, should we be welcoming? We're seeing the rise of these sort of people talking about low code and no code now. And I was a low code skeptic. I mean, certainly the notion of I'm going to draw a diagram and it's going to auto-generate code. Well, it's going to generate janky code. That's going to be a bit of a nightmare. But on the other hand, we have to put tools in people's hands so they can become more effective. And again, a wider range of folks. You look at something like Salesforce, and I'll talk about Trailhead in a minute, their demographic is very different. The Salesforce admin demographic, and those are people that are basically configuring software systems to create business outcomes, much better diversity than we see in other areas. And I think that's something we can learn from. It might be something like Airtable. There's lots and lots of different ways to code. And I think that as an industry, again, we have to be more welcoming to that. So Shanku Nyogi says from GitHub, software development is the largest team sport on Earth. Obviously never heard of Fortnite. So Fortnite, in a sense, is not a team sport, right? Because you're all trying to kill each other. Battle Royale. But certainly massive online environment in which people collaborate. And mostly through shouting at each other. Anyone have a teen son here? Yeah, you know the shouting, right? Why do you have to shout so much? Yeah, so I hear a lot of that. But kind of interesting, I looked at my son and I'm like, what does the future look like? What does the future look like? It's going to look like this. Because he's there and he's playing Fortnite. He's watching a YouTube video. He's got his first girlfriend, and the camera's on. He's like, I'm like, maybe you don't want to shout in your girlfriend's ear, But anyway, the cam's on constantly, and it's sort of ambient intimacy. They're just, for these kids, it's like we don't need, we'll be at a friend's house. And they'll say, actually, can I, like the kids, they're there together, and they're like, can we go home to our respective homes so we can play? I'm like, what? I mean, you want to, yeah. Then they go to their own homes, get on their gamer rigs, and then they're having fun together. I mean, we used to like to go to the same place, right? He does have a date with his girlfriend once a week, though, so he may understand the values of coming together every now and then. Yeah, that was amazing. I mean, in terms of trust, that was a great moment. He was there. I wasn't at home, but he's sitting at his PC and he leans back and he looks at my wife and he just said, am I old enough to have a girlfriend? And she looked at him, and she said, I think so. And he just said, good. A little bit more about that story, talking about being welcoming. I wasn't going to tell this. I'm wildly off the rails now, but there's a let's see, is Josie here? So, well, anyway, I was telling a story to Josie yesterday about this. There was a coding competition recently run by my local in my local borough, and it was lovely to see the diversity there, right? For lots of black kids, plenty of girls doing it, and I was quite proud because my son was on a team and they came second, right? I was like, that's great, you did so well. And he's like, yeah, I got all this swag from Twilio, and I got 50, what did you get? I think you got 150 pounds or something. I was like, oh, that's great, that's great. Who came first? He was like, oh, Clapton Girls, nearby school. So the girls had beaten the boys, standard, right? But 2 weeks later, he's dating one of the girls that had beat him in the coding competition. And that, my friends, I think, the kids are okay, right? So ambient intimacy, what does that look like? How can we collaborate in teams? So these are my friends at Sneak. Again, a distributed team. They've got a team in Boston, they've got a team in London, and they've got a team in Tel Aviv. And the founder, Guy Bajani, great guy, love Guy. He wanted to be closer to Tel Aviv, so that's one reason he's not in Silicon Valley. He's like, I want to be closer to home. So they think a lot about how to collaborate and work together as a team. In every office, they have a massive screen, right? Really impressive stuff. I wish I could afford a TV like that. Amazing, huge, or in fact, it's not whether I can afford it. I wish I had a wall that big. So anyway, huge screen, about that big, huge screen. And they've got a camera, and basically all day, they've just got the teams in the other geos, like on the wall. And it's that phrase, I don't know if you sort of looked at this, it's 2007. Lisa Reichelt, she's an amazing user experience designer, coined this phrase, ambient intimacy. And that's what I'm seeing with my son. That's what I'm seeing with like how kids communicate. And I think we do that a bit, It's like, I'm not quite shouting at everyone on Discord, but I'm shouting at them on Twitter, right? So that's Sneak. But let's have a bit of a shift, because, how are we going to bring more people into the fold? Salesforce has done an absolutely bang-up job of an easy on-ramp to tech learning with a platform called Trailhead. And my Trailhead story is sort of interesting. I was leaving San Francisco after being at Dreamforce, and I had a Salesforce bag. Like, I'm not proud. I just will I wear swag bags. I've got a Google Cloud one in the back, so first keynote would have appreciated that, I'm sure. And I'm carrying this Salesforce bag, and a young woman, a black woman, who works for the TSA, says, "Oh, do you work for Salesforce?" And I said, "No, but I've just been to Dreamforce." And she said, "It is my ambition to become a Salesforce admin." And she pulls out her phone and these are the physical badges of the Trailhead badges that I've got. And that was kind of really amazing to me. I mean, it's not amazing that someone would not want to work for the TSA, because that has to suck, right? All day long, people hate you. So getting into tech probably seems like a good idea. And I was lucky enough that I was able to get her a ticket for the next year and stuff like that. She is amazing. She's great. But Trailhead and Salesforce does a brilliant job. And so for them, it's an economic empowerment, right? So average US salary for a Salesforce admin is like $86,000 a year. That's a pretty good kind of middle-class salary. You can get a job with that. You can get health care. You can get all the things you need in the States, right? So, and it is, when you go to Dreamforce, it is such a different kind of environment, right? It's in terms of the people. It's just a wider range of people, a lot more women, more people of color, and I don't think it's accidental, and it's ridiculous. 170,000 people at the conference, right? I don't think it's accidental that it still feels like fun. Not quite. Anyone here from Oracle? So Oracle Open World is not as fun. That was a bit of a low blow, but they may see it on video. But So anyway, Glitch. Glitch is this amazing thing. It's really weird. One of the things I think is the design aesthetic. You're like, wow, that looks kind of janky, doesn't it? But it's just a brilliant, brilliant place. You can be on that and be coding so quickly, sharing code, building little widgets, and anybody in the world can come on here and start to learn how to code. And I think that's amazing because, as I say, we've got global scale problems that we need to solve. Twitch. And this is, it was like a gamer platform. That's what my son keeps asking for an account, but I don't think he's quite ready. But as Noopcat, it's now being used in programming. She calls it massive multiplayer online pair programming. Because this is amazing. You don't need to be in the same place to pair program, right? If you look at I mentioned Visual Studio Code. You can be collaborating on the same piece of code as them. You can collaborate with anyone in the world and teach them how to code, and they can improve your code. This is amazing. This is an amazing opportunity for everyone. Or you can do all the other things people do on Twitch, which I'm going to avoid talking about. YouTube. YouTube, apart from the fact it's an absolute cesspit, as a parent, like, my number one job is to try and teach my kids to not go down YouTube sort of rabbit holes. It's constantly, I'm constantly talking to my son about, like, red pilling. He'll say something, and I'll say, where did you get that? Like, why are you even thinking about that? All of his friends, they do ambient intimacy, but they love trolling. So they've all got, like, a pet conspiracy theory. One of them will be talking, oh yeah, the world is flat. One of them will talk some nonsense about anti-vax. That's the bad news. The good news is, fantastic place to learn things about coding. It's just such an incredible resource. Anyone can learn about almost anything. If you want to make something, you can go to YouTube, you can find out about that. Fantastic asset, and again, it's accessible to everybody. Code Academy, brilliant. There are just all of these fantastic communities that we can join that can help us learn to code. I think the question for us as an industry, though, is how do we ensure that we are welcoming to those people when they arrive? That's the question. So, a change of gear. Has anyone used any jump bikes while they've been here in Lisbon, or the scooters? Anyone? Come on, really? Okay, before you go home, take a ride on a jump bike along the river there. It's beautiful, right? It's so flexible. It's such an easy way of getting around. They've actually got pretty good transport infrastructure here. I've been thinking about cycling a lot because I'm really here to talk about the future of work. And, what's it going to look like? All of these developers all over the world. I ride my bike to work every day. Bicycling infrastructure is very important because here's the context. Like, okay, we're moving towards lots more software developers, but we also really need to do a better job of asking ourselves, what is the world going to look like if we keep behaving in the way we do? Cycling infrastructure, I think, is just such a brilliant sort of example of how we can change and make things better for everyone. If you go to Copenhagen or you go to Amsterdam, it's just amazing. Such a great experience getting on a bike. In fact, Amsterdam's gone the full, now being a pedestrian is scary. Right? Because any Dutch people here? Yeah, you love to cycle, right? I'm there walking through Vondelpark, and there's someone cycling along on their phone, ignoring everybody. They don't care. I'm a cyclist. I'm a cyclist. You get out of my way. So that's all good. Here's the thing. We've got these global scale challenges. We want to work more effectively together. We need to change our behaviors. We can't keep doing things the way we are. People are like, oh, yeah, no, it's going to be great. We're going to invent planes that, run on oxygen or something. And you're like, well, when's that going to happen? Right? Oh, well, so we're going to have electric planes. I'm like, well, okay, when's that going to happen? I flew here. I haven't flown as much this year. That is goodness. But everything we do, we need to kind of rethink a bit. And I think ambient intimacy and the future of work, that's kind of part of how we're going to be collaborating in future. Because what are we doing, right? Oh, Bitcoin. Anyone here got any Bitcoin? Anyone? Yeah. Okay, good, thank you. Someone's admitting it. You're killing the planet. No. Bitcoin has been somewhat of a phenomenon. From my perspective, it's just terrifying, the energy consumption of Bitcoin. So, you're talking about like, sort of basically, Bitcoin is like countries in scale. Just for something that may or may not have a value. Proof of work is a really dumb model, right? This is 100,000 Visa transactions versus one Bitcoin transaction in terms of power consumption, and we're all out here saying Bitcoin is the future. Like, what? I don't know, you might be climate change deniers. I really hope not. We need to change our behaviors. So what can we do? Okay. I said some things about Amazon. Let's say something about Google Cloud. Google Cloud is running renewable infrastructure. So if you choose to run your Jenkins jobs on Google Cloud, that actually is a sustainable decision. So you can feel good about that. How about that? A little pitch for cloud bees in the middle of my keynote. Amazon's like, oh, we're customer focused. We don't actually care, but if customers tell us to do something, we're probably going to do it. So this is Adrienne Cockcroft, amazing chap. Sort of, a lot of this kind of if we look at a lot of the things we've learned from Netflix, he's just a brilliant evangelist for sort of DevOps, chaos computing, resiliency, all of that sort of stuff. He said, if you want to influence AWS, right, get our customers to move capacity to green regions. So if you're in IT, one of the things you can go away and do tomorrow, take back into your business, because you use Amazon as well as Google Cloud, I know you do. So Amazon is to choose these regions. Ireland, so basically that's EU East, EU West, Canada, US West, and EU Frankfurt. Those are all renewable energy. If you do that, you are encouraging Amazon to change its behaviors, right? That is something that Amazon seems like this huge company that you can't sort of make do stuff. You can influence Amazon. I think it's a shame that they're not being more aggressive about this. It's like, well, if you know that you can be more sustainable, why don't you actually do that rather than waiting for the customers to push us that way? But on the other hand, customers of Amazon, that's your homework, please. We're going to have to collaborate more, but we're going to have to travel less, right? We need distributed computing. It's great, distributed computing. I mean, sort of examples like all of Google's collaboration team all work on one campus. It's like, oh, we're building distributed systems, but you have to live in San Francisco. So I think we're sort of moving to a world where it is more distributed. It's a world of distributed work. I don't really like the word remote work, because that's sort of, you say, oh, you're remote. Nobody really wants to feel remote, do they? Well, actually, some people do, but I don't. Distributed work, and what does that look like? Less travel, more collaboration, more welcoming communities, doing a better job at communicating online with ambient intimacy. So, in London, there's been this sort of phenomenon, the startups, it's a big thing. It didn't used to be like that. When I began in this industry, I used to say to people, because I chose to live in London, I love London. London is a great city. Anti-Brexit, so, London's fine. The rest of the country is an absolute shit show, but... So, any English people here? Yeah. Anyone not from London? Okay. You're all lovely people. You're all lovely people. I just do not understand that. I really don't. Anyway, so London's great. I love it. I love all of England. It's great. It's great. It's great. Please do the right thing next week. That guy is such a moron. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. That guy. Oh, God. In fact, all of them. Get rid of all of them. So anyway, so this place called Shoreditch. I was in Shoreditch, and I moved there because it was cheap, and developers were there because it was cheap. And one day, this guy, Matt Biddulph, sort of came up with a joke. He said, I know, we'll call it the Silicon Roundabout. And then this newspaper cottoned onto that, and they're like, oh, we'll call it the Silicon Roundabout. So there's like 12 companies at the time, back in, 2007 or something. I guess it was when Twitter was kicking off. So anyway, it was interesting because it was a joke. But because it was in a newspaper, it became a thing. So the government started investing in that, lots of inward investment. But I had spent all my time since I joined the industry saying, you don't need to move to San Francisco in order to succeed in tech. It was always kind of a lie. But I was also kind of telling myself that. My mum, very wise woman, told me in 1992, you should move to California. There's always something interesting happening there. I was like, no, I'm going to stay in London. 3 years later, yeah, she's a wise woman. So anyway, what's interesting to me is that you don't need to go to the States anymore. And I think there's some really interesting phenomena that happen even within the networks. So in London, it's got super expensive. Like, I can't afford to be there anymore. It's a nightmare. But then, so people have moved to Brighton. So you've got like a tech cluster in Brighton. So whilst you get more and more concentration in these nodes, you also see them spreading out. And I think that's really interesting. So like people have now decided you're not going to relocate to San Francisco. You're going to relocate to somewhere else. Like San Francisco is beginning to distribute out. London's beginning to distribute out. Development is happening in Lisbon. Development is happening in Berlin. It's happening in Frankfurt. It's happening in Milan. Development's happening in Madrid. Development is spreading out. And we don't need to move ourselves in order to be part of this community. So I'm a big fan of Greta Thunberg. I really wish, like she said, she didn't have to do what she's doing. She's in Lisbon this week. And so I guess she arrived the same day I did. She's making a point, right? She's not saying, oh, you're all bad because you took a flight. She's saying there is a different way that we could behave. And there are a different set of decisions that we could make. And when I look at my industry, and I'm thinking about like how we're all going to collaborate, and I talk about, the problem of not getting visas. I mean, this is an industry that prides itself on disruption and then spends all of its time on airplanes. It's like, are we not building social networks here? Are we not building infrastructure that we can collaborate more effectively? And if we're not, why are we not doing that? Like, what's the opportunity here? And I really, I just think about this a lot because, yeah, the world is beautiful, right? Humans actually are incredible. We can collaborate effectively. The greatest achievements generally actually have been collaborative. So let's optimize for that. So what can kind of DevOps learn from that? What can dev teams learn from that? You need things, some practical things. Again, in the micro level, you do. You need things like code of conduct. You need to think about, well, oh, wait, we should do all of our comms in Slack so that the people that are on campus aren't advantaged in their communications. Let's think about what it means to work more effectively together, even if we're not all in the same place. Because this is not optional. If you believe in science, if you believe in gravity, this is not optional. There's a better future that we can have. So, accessibility, inclusion, thinking about people with different languages, and I'm sorry if I've spoken too quickly. I always do this at DevOps World. I should slow down. There was a wonderful French woman last year that said, I got halfway through my presentation, and I said, but that was a joke. She said, well, I haven't heard a word you've said because you speak too fast. Sorry about that. So I have failed on all of the things that I'm telling you you should do, which is a very human thing. Check your biases. Think about diverse hiring, but what does that look like? You know, are there things that are like gendered in your job ads? You know, your team is almost invariably hiring. There are some great resources out there about making it more appealing. And also, you just need to optimize for that. Because honestly, if you're, say, a black woman, and you're going to join a tech team, and everyone on it is white, they're just not going to want to join the team. That means the onus is on you to unlock the talent by really, really focusing and doing a better job of attracting some people that may come from a different background, right? And we're going to have to do that. These are global challenges. We need to involve and include everybody, right? So there's a sort of an activation energy. It's like a catalyst. Investing more in diversity means that you can do better hiring. There's a great example of this company called Honeycomb. You know, people talk. The network talks, and they know that there are better places to work. And that's the challenge at the end of the day. We're all in tech. There are not enough people out there. We need to grow the community. We all have choices. We have choices as IT practitioners. We have choices about the energy that we consume. We have choices about who we hire and who we work with. So let's just try and collaborate more effectively. Thanks.